大家好，香港時間早上應該係晏晝嘅5:04，收睇緊嘅係 Action World 世界頻道同埋 Facebook 直播。今日咧就喺北美時段咧就幾早嚇，依家係朝頭早5:04，咁就喺英國倫敦時間咧就係10:04啦。咁今日同我哋傾偈嘅咧就係有 Hong Kong Watch 嘅創辦人Benedict Ben Rogers 喺度。Ben 你好。
你好，very good to be with you.
Yeah, so it has been a while. Last year, I think we didn't do as much dialogue because you were busy writing your book. But the year before that, I left Hong Kong in 2021, and during that 9 months, we did quite a few dialogues in Vancouver. But now I've moved to the East Coast, so I hope we can keep up the momentum because Mr. Lai's trial is coming up in September, and I wish we could see you more on the channel or in person.
Absolutely. Well, I'm always delighted to speak with you, and absolutely want to increase the focus on Jimmy Lai's case in particular. So very, very happy to help.
Yes. And I just actually came back from Taiwan in April, and I got a gift. Just want to show you.
Oh, very good.
Just in one of those grabbing machines. So anyway.
That's great, and mine is behind me, as you can see. So
yes, I can see that. Yeah, it's a cushion. Now, for the audience who who has watched our live program for the first time, I want to start from 2017. Was it the year that you went to Hong Kong but didn't really cross immigration?
That's right. It was October 2017. It was before we had launched Hong Kong Watch, although we were planning the launch of it. And I believe I was probably the first Westerner to be denied entry to Hong Kong, specifically on the orders of Beijing. So I flew to Hong Kong, and at immigration, I was told that they had, they didn't tell me initially what the reason was. They just said there was a problem. They asked to talk to me. They took me aside. And then eventually they told me that Beijing had ordered them to deny me entry. And I was put on a plane out, and it became at the time quite a big story. The media were informed. The British Foreign Secretary was Boris Johnson at that time, and he made a very strong statement. It was raised in both houses of our parliament. But I always said to people who were raising my case, I said, by all means raise the case, but please don't make it about me. Make it about Hong Kong and what this incident actually shows about the direction Hong Kong is going in. Of course, given everything that's happened in Hong Kong since then, my experience is a very tiny experience, but I think it was an early warning sign of worse to come.
Yes. And after you, there was the former FCC Vice Chairman Victor Mollett with Financial Times as well, denying entry. And most currently, someone who tried to enter Hong Kong, that's Lee Cheuk-Yin's wife. Actually, they let him go inside and then arrested her when she was trying to visit Lee Cheuk-Yin in Stanley Prison.
That's right.
Yeah, so it's quite chilling.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, since my 2017 incident, I had a subsequent incident last year where I was officially notified by the Hong Kong Police Force and the National Security Bureau that what I'm doing could be in violation of the national security law, even though I have no presence in Hong Kong. I'm working from London, traveling to North America and other parts of Europe. But because of the extraterritoriality clause of the national security law, they said that unless I cease my activities more or less immediately from receiving this letter, I could face a prison sentence in Hong Kong. So I definitely won't be going back to Hong Kong. But also I think that is another warning for people around the world that the Chinese Communist Party is intent on trying to silence dissent, not only within Hong Kong, but around the world.
But isn't it kind of sarcastic? Now we had Carrie Lam, the former chief executive, and last year it's changed to John Lee, and then the chief security. It's what's his name? Chris Tang, right? Deng Bingke. Well, they always say tell good Hong Kong story. Isn't it? They should welcome people from even the diaspora community to revisit Hong Kong, and then you lived in Hong Kong as a journalist, right? Back many years ago.
That's right. Yes, I lived in Hong Kong for 5 years, and it was the first 5 years after the handover, so from 1997 to 2002. And yes, I agree. They've launched this big campaign to attract visitors to Hong Kong. They're offering free flights. They just recently welcomed the first British government minister, Lord Johnson, on a basically a trade visit, and they're trying to pretend everything is normal. But clearly, when there are so many Hong Kongers who have left Hong Kong because they're in fear of being arrested and imprisoned, and there are foreigners like myself who are banned and threatened, it's press freedom. Freedom of assembly, freedom of expression have been dismantled. Hundreds of political prisoners are in jail. It's clearly not business as usual, and we must make it really clear to the international community, not to buy the propaganda that the Hong Kong government is trying to put out.
We did launch these the World Hong Kong Forum. The first time was last year from June 30th till July 4th is 4.5 days. It was in Toronto. And then it's divided into 4 different sections: politics, investments, religion, and also culture. Now, of course, when we talk about investments, everyone speaks the same language, so to speak, but we cannot ignore human rights and high impact governance. These are very important things. This is like a global standard. But do you think, I really wish one day the World Hong Kong Forum, we could have it hosted inside of Hong Kong, because when they say tell the good Hong Kong story, that means they should accept all criticisms, left, center, and right. But now it seems like it becomes kind of a leftist. And to me, I don't know whether it is John Lee or Beijing who wants to have this all draconian ideology and banning or stopping people from entering, and then also like banning books. And I'm sure you have read it too. Like comic artists now cannot write in Ming Pao, and then some of the commentators, even though they are quite mild, they cannot be found in the Hong Kong public library system anymore. So it's kind of sad.
Absolutely. It's extremely sad. I mean, I think it's a very common tactic of dictators to either ban books or in some cases burn books. We saw that during the Cultural Revolution. We saw it in Nazi Germany. And now in Hong Kong, I don't think they're burning books, but they are banning books, definitely. And it's a clear sign. It's the clearest possible sign that they don't want a diversity of ideas and information. They want to totally control what people read and therefore what people think.
Do you think John Lee and Chris Tang, these guys, they are second guessing what Beijing thinks, and they overdo what Beijing really wants, or they just want to show their patriotism?
It's hard to know. I mean, I think there's probably a combination of factors going on. I mean, without doubt, Xi Jinping is a much, much more hardline authoritarian leader than his predecessors, and of course, they were not democrats either. They were dictators, but he's a much more repressive dictator. So I think part of it is coming from Beijing, from Xi Jinping overall. But I think John Lee, of course, his only experience in working life before becoming chief executive, apart from briefly being chief secretary beforehand, his only experience was in policing. He was a frontline police officer, and then he was security secretary. So his mindset, I think, is totally focused on policing and security. And I think from that mindset, perhaps he really wants to enforce the national security law in the toughest possible way. And the same is true for Chris Tang. So, yeah, I think they're trying to prove their patriotism. I think they may be trying to second guess what Beijing wants and going further. But I also think Beijing has shaped the atmosphere in which this is happening.
And one thing I want to ask you, Ben, now, I know what Hong Kong Watch does is doing a lot of good things, and with Chris Patten as the patron, is defending Hong Kong's old core values. What we at the World Hong Kong Forum, this is the second year coming up on the political section, and I'm just brainstorming. It's whether we could engage some people from Hong Kong who are not the extremists to be inside the platform, because we need dialogue to talk to them somehow. I mean, I'm thinking of the two Michaels and also Wang Wanzhou. It's more like a prisoner swap, so to speak, right? Political prisoner swap. But now it seems like we don't have a dialogue. I don't consider myself as like 100% anti-China, because we all, like as Hong Kongers, will still have colleagues or family members, relatives that are somehow they still haven't left Hong Kong yet. So why should I be 100% against them? But we are against the policy. We don't like the way they set up the NSL and also violating the one country, two systems. So do you think any dialogue, even inside Hong Kong Watch, if you organize a forum, and you have organized so many of them, try to, let's say, engage some people from the Legislative Council? I mean, I know it sounds kind of crazy, but some of these legislators, and all of them are like pro-establishment. They like to show off. They like to show off their English. Like some of them, they intend to come to the UK. And I saw in the social media you were against one legislator from coming to the UK, right? What do you think? What's the best way to start a conversation? And I'm kind of stuck here myself.
Well, certainly I have never been against engagement and dialogue. I'm for, in principle, engagement and dialogue. And when people ask me, are you in favor of engagement with China, or do you advocate sanctions with China? My position is I advocate both. I think that you need kind of carrot and stick, and we definitely need the stick of sanctions, because if Beijing and their accomplices in Hong Kong are allowed to get away with what they've done to Hong Kong with no consequences, that sends a very dangerous message. But of course, you can't ignore China. We have to find ways to engage. And my view is always, the question shouldn't be should we engage. The question is how to engage, and on whose terms, and about what.
Right.
In terms of people in Hong Kong who are either pro-Beijing or more in the middle, I think I certainly wouldn't be against it. I'm not sure that that Hong Kong Watch would be the right vehicle for that, because our position is so clear. We've been so critical of the government. So I doubt that they would really want to talk directly to us, or to have us arranging any kind of dialogue. But if somebody else was in a position to do so, depending on what the topic and objectives of the dialogue are, then I would say try it.
I mean, in our investment part, I mean, we divide it into 4 different sections, as I alluded to earlier: politics, investments, religion, and culture. Let's say we get strong enough panel, for instance, get some of the fund managers, of the world who are neutral to what China is doing or a little bit against China have it hosted inside the Wan Chai, whatever stadium. They cannot arrest the fund managers, right? I mean, we're talking about businesses here, and they want money, right? They want people to go back instead of money leaving for Singapore. So and honestly, I think Johnny has done a very poor job in attracting capital with this fierce-looking kind of bland face. But then I don't want to talk too much about him because that affects my appetite, and I'm doing an MRI thing like in 2 hours in the hospital.
Right.
That's a different story.
Yes.
Going back. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that trying to engage the fund managers and businesses is a good idea because they ought to be worried about the direction Hong Kong is going in, because from an investment point of view, if the rule of law is eroded, the independence of the judiciary is eroded, there's no more press freedom, and therefore transparency and accountability are affected. Even though currently those issues seem to affect the political realm rather than the economic realm, sooner or later they will impact the economic area as well, because of if China has a business that doesn't like another business, we know how they operate in the mainland, and if there's no rule of law or transparency in Hong Kong, or it's much weaker, that will have an impact on the financial sector. So I think engaging them is a good idea, and if you can find the right model and the right people to do it, I would say do try it.
Yes, and I wish I could speak to you more in the next 3 quarters before the year ends. Now you see the ticker underneath. We have Mr. Jimmy Lai and so many others that you probably know: Lee Cheuk-Yan, Albert Ho, Claudia Mo. They're all in prison, detained. To get them out right away, it's almost impossible. Harder than climbing Mount Everest, for an average person. You mentioned sanctions, but I also heard from Mr. Lai's youngest son, Sebastian, talk about the UK government is not doing much. And he was in Washington, D.C. last week, and he just received the Milton Friedman Award just a few hours ago through the Cato Institute, I think it's called. What happened to the UK PM Sunak? Is he doing much to help to listen to the Apple Daily and Mr. Lai's story, or is he just indifferent, just want more businesses with China? I mean, I got confused with this new prime minister.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say I'm also rather confused by him. Firstly, I should say I really welcome the Cato Institute's awarding the Milton Friedman Award to Jimmy Lai, and I hope that more organizations around the world will recognize the extraordinary courage of Jimmy Lai and indeed of other political prisoners in similar ways. On the British government's position, it's really troubling because Jimmy Lai, for example, is himself a British citizen, as is Sebastian, his son. And Sebastian has been over to London a couple of times this year already, has requested a meeting with Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, or James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary, has not received a reply. He has had 2 meetings with a junior minister in the Foreign Office, Anne-Marie Trevelyan, and that's, of course, very welcome, and that is a step forward compared to where we were last year, where the British government was not saying or doing anything, seemingly. And the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, did raise Jimmy Lai's case when he spoke at the United Nations Human Rights Council in March. But Rishi Sunak's position is very confusing, because when he ran for the leadership last year, he seemed to take quite a tough line on China. For example, he promised to close Confucius institutes in the UK.
Yes, we heard.
He now seems to have really rode back on that promise and weakened his position. And I think that he hasn't gone back to where we were a few years ago with the so-called golden era of Sino-British relations. I think he does recognize that China poses a major challenge on human rights, but also to our national security and our own freedoms. I think he recognizes that, but he's also trying to balance that with the trading and economic interests, and hence the position is, in my view, very confusing. And it's on Jimmy Lai's case, the Prime Minister has been asked in Prime Minister's questions in the House of Commons very directly about Jimmy Lai. He seems to be reluctant even to use Jimmy's name when he speaks. He doesn't refer to him by name. Of course, he expresses concern, and I know he has expressed concern privately to some Hong Kongers who had a chance to meet him, and he did express his concern for Jimmy. But he doesn't seem to be keen to do what the British government should do for a British citizen, which is really to speak out and appeal for his release. So we're keeping up the pressure on the British government to do more.
On that front, with King Charles' coronation just a few days ago, I heard rumors that some Hong Kong groups met up with King Charles. Was it Simon Chang's group? Is it?
That's right. I believe they were invited to a garden party at Buckingham Palace 1 or 2 days before the coronation, and I think they presented some artwork. I don't know for certain if they met the king in person or if they were just attending a reception with the king, but certainly they were at Buckingham Palace, and that was very encouraging. I mean, in my view, it was a mistake not to invite prominent figures from the Hong Kong diaspora in the UK to the coronation itself, because I can understand that we probably had to invite China because we were inviting every country that we have relations with. But of course, China chose to send the vice president, who was himself one of the architects of the crackdown in Hong Kong. And it seemed like Beijing was sending a deliberate kind of insult to the king and to the UK by sending Han Zheng, who was so responsible for dismantling Hong Kong's freedoms. So I think if we had to, personally, I think we should have sanctioned Han Zheng and not allowed him to come. But recognizing that probably is unrealistic. If we were going to accept and welcome Han Zheng, we should have had people like Nathan Law or other prominent Hong Kongers attending the coronation as well, and we didn't. So I think that was a mistake.
I wish you would be invited to be honest, and maybe hold up a protest sign. Of course, it's not the appropriate occasion to do that, we know, but King Charles, it's symbolic because of the handover.
Yes.
And I think I cannot read him, but I wish the king really understand the vexation of Hong Kong people. Like we are all overseas now, and we all want Hong Kong to be the same good old Hong Kong that Beijing has promised on their side, one country, two systems. And there is definitely no two systems. But go back to the diaspora community. I think we will see the community getting stronger and stronger. When we might have a bigger disconnect coming up with Hong Kong being silenced, and then in the UK, there's more people coming over from Hong Kong, and same as in Canada. So we have to rebuild the old Hong Kong in other cities, like it or not.
That's right. I think I always say Hong Kong is not dead because Hong Kong lives on in the hearts and minds of Hong Kongers. But Hong Kong, as we knew it in the city of Hong Kong, it has changed definitely very, very dramatically and very significantly. Just coming back to King Charles, if I may, very briefly. Obviously, I can't speak for him, and I don't know exactly what his position is, but I'm reasonably hopeful that he does understand the situation and is sympathetic for several reasons. I mean, firstly, he has, when he was the Prince of Wales before he became king, he has quite a track record of indicating his dislike of the Chinese Communist Party regime. I think there was an occasion where he refused to attend a banquet at Buckingham Palace when a Chinese leader came. He's well known for his friendship with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who
Picture behind you, I can see.
Exactly. Who he's met several times. And when after he attended the handover ceremony in Hong Kong in 1997 on behalf of the Queen, I believe he kept a private diary, and that diary leaked. I don't think he intended to publish it, but in his private diary, he made some very disparaging comments about the Chinese leaders and his concerns for Hong Kong. And I think I recall he actually wrote that he was concerned about whether the day would come when pro-democracy politicians might receive a knock in the middle of the night and be taken off to prison. So I think his concerns over the years have been clear. And of course, as king now, he's more limited in what he can and can't say because he can't make political comments. But I think we can be confident that he will be concerned about the situation, and I hope he will find opportunities like the garden party just before the coronation to engage with the Hong Kong diaspora here.
For the upcoming Hong Kong Watch sessions, do you think you could invite the king, I don't know, like through Chris Patten, so he could have like a direct engagement with Hong Kongers? Honestly, there's so many of them. I mean, I'm just guessing, because if Sunak is shutting the door, is it possible?
I think that's a very interesting idea, and I of course I can't guarantee it, but it's certainly something I could explore, and it would be well worth exploring.
I will buy a ticket to come to the UK if that happens.
Great.
Now, going back to the new book that you you publish. Actually, it was published last year. Is it in December? Sometime.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. And I got an online copy because I could not find one inside the bookstore yet. I did see it actually in Toronto now.
Right.
How well received is it? I saw you have put it on the social media. You went to Dharamsala a few months ago, and then you gave a book to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, which was great. And then in the book cover, there's also a Tibetan flag I saw, right? So it's not just about Hong Kong, it's about the struggle with, I guess, different communities that are being suppressed by the CCP, right? It's called the China Nexus.
That's exactly right. So it basically covers all the major human rights challenges caused by the CCP. So it has two chapters on Hong Kong, actually. One chapter looking at the first 5 years after the handover, when I lived and worked in Hong Kong, and that's some of my reflections on that time. But then later in the book, there's a chapter on the situation in Hong Kong from the time of the Umbrella Movement in 2014 onwards until the current day. And then it has chapters on Tibet, on the Uyghurs, on forced organ harvesting, persecution of Christians, the crackdown on dissidents and civil society and lawyers in mainland China. And it also has a chapter on the threats to Taiwan, and then also chapters on the CCP's complicity with two other dictatorships in the region, the military dictatorship in Myanmar or Burma, and the regime in North Korea, both of which I've worked on for many years. So I've written it in quite a personal way. It's not a personal memoir, but I draw on my personal experiences, and I also interviewed over 80 people whose stories I include in the book. And as you say, yes, I had an opportunity in March to to go to Dharamsala to present the book to His Holiness. And I had also been able to interview His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, for the book last year. I'd interviewed him in writing, but he had provided some comments that he gave me permission to quote in the book. So that was a very special experience. Yeah.
Is your book available in Hong Kong, China Nexus?
I don't actually know. I suspect, given recently the government's decision to ban various books, I suspect it's unlikely that it will be in bookshops, although it's certainly available through Amazon. And if Amazon can reach Hong Kong, then it can be available that way. And maybe some people have brought copies into Hong Kong privately, but I doubt it would be in the bookshops.
Right. If they cannot get it, get a VPN and then get it from the overseas Amazon store.
Yes.
If they cannot get it in Hong Kong, so to speak. Your upcoming trip to Canada, I think you will be visiting Toronto next week to talk about your book and also speak with the Tibetan community as well, right? Tell us more about.
That's right. So I'll be in Toronto next weekend. We'll be doing an event with the Hong Kong community, and as you say, another event with the Tibetan community. Then I will be going on to Ottawa the following week, where we will be officially launching Hong Kong Watch Canada. We've had Hong Kong Watch Canada in existence for some while now, and we have colleagues in Canada who've been working very hard, but we will officially have the launch in the Canadian Parliament in Ottawa the week after next.
Oh, that would be very exciting. Because it's more direct engagement.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. And then I'll be in Washington, D.C. the week after that. So I have a 2-week North America trip coming up.
And in DC, is there a colleague in Washington D.C. now?
So we don't currently have a colleague based in Washington D.C. We did have Joey Sue working for us last year, but she's moved on. So currently we're doing our Washington D.C. advocacy from London. Myself and my colleagues traveling there regularly and doing online meetings as well. And because we've been working in Washington D.C. actually since the very beginning of Hong Kong Watch, so we've got a well-established reputation and set of relationships in the U.S. Congress, the State Department, and in other institutions. In the long term, we very much hope to have somebody working for us based in Washington D.C., but currently we don't.
Right. And for the upcoming World Hong Kong Forum on September 1st to 3rd, that runs from Friday to Sunday, I need to pick your brains, Ben, when we have this English section, whether we should engage more from the Hong Kong side, whether these are like parliamentarians or they call it legislative councillors. I don't know. There are 90 of them. None of them I know now because most of the people I know now is inside the ticket who is in prison. So, but definitely we could brainstorm more in the next 100 days or so, because I really find to have a dialogue with them is important. Even when you negotiate, and I'm not saying Hong Kong, when you negotiate with terrorists, if there's a terrorist situation, you still have to have dialogue with the other party. Right? Otherwise, people become victims. Those who are stuck inside a plane or inside a building. Right? We need to talk to the other side, figuratively speaking.
Yes.
And we look forward to seeing you next weekend at the Gibson Center.
That's right. Yes, I'm looking forward to it very much.
Yes. And we'll stop the live program now. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks so much for having me. Good to be with you.
Thanks.